Global Transformation Astrology, GTA, with William Stickevers.
So the October eclipses to the U.S. Declaration Independence Horoscope. If we look at the eclipse, we can see here that the solar eclipse is making a direct hit on the Mercury-Pluto opposition alignment in the U.S. Independence Horoscope. This is followed by the lunar eclipse, which is making a direct hit to the ascendant-descendant axis and to the nodal axis. So both to the ascendant-descendant and nodal axis of the U.S. Independence Horoscope. So the United States is certainly getting double whammied. While both these eclipses are activating the nodal axis here, you could see that, right? It's certainly tying them in. We see the U.S. Pluto return going almost exact. We're getting another recapitulation of that Pluto return. Pluto return, so, right, activation, the eclipse activating the Mercury-Pluto, and then we see the eclipse activating the node here, which is very much tied in with the south node tied with the U.S. Pluto. So we're seeing a reconstellation of Pluto. Pluto is going to be injected. That Plutonian energy, that Pluto return energy is going to be re-injected at the most inauspicious time, at the most inappropriate moment, onto the body politic of America and spill out like a virus, spread out on the world stage. So we will see more of this Pluto return stuff. So for those of you who are new and those of you who don't remember, right, we talked about the astrology of the fourth turning event correlating with various different returns in history. For example, the U.S. Neptune return occurred during the previous fourth turning event from 1929 to 1945, which correlated with World War II and the Great Depression. We saw the Uranus return, the first U.S. Uranus return, correlate with the fourth turning crisis of 1857 to 1865 with the American Civil War. Now we have the U.S. Pluto return. It's correlated now with the fourth turning that there's consensus now. We have consensus that started in 2008 and will last at least to 2028. And I'm going to make a call soon that it's going to probably last to 2032, but earliest 2028, latest 2032, where we're now entering the third stage or the third act of the fourth turning crisis. So what are the things we can say? What can we say since 2008 to present day? So there's a number of things based on the Pluto return and things that we have to keep in mind as we get closer to the eclipse and into the final quarter of 2023. So I'm just going to knock them off, and hopefully this will give you an idea that basically sets it up for what will be happening next in the forthcoming days to weeks ahead. So what we're seeing with this Pluto return during America's fourth turning crisis is American democracy is collapsing in real time, where the justice system is being weaponized to imprison political opponents, and the media and tech companies are working in collusion and manipulating information for the public. The United States is essentially becoming a country descending into authoritarian plutocratic dictatorship, or what I call a totalitarian democracy. The mainstream American media is actively suppressing or manipulating information to serve a partisan agenda. So manipulating information to serve a partisan agenda that is aligned with the Democratic Party and the progressive left, the extreme progressive left. We're not talking like, blue dog Democrats, if you will. We're not talking about, Harry Truman Democrats or Lyndon Johnson Democrats. We're not talking about those Democrats, right? We're not talking about even JFK Democrats, right? And we're talking about radical progressive left Democrats that are now pulling the strings that fundamentally align more with fascism, not communism so much, but fascism, right? And what we're seeing now is where reporters self-censor out of fear rather than dedication to accuracy. What we're also seeing is the Biden family has engaged or continues to engage, has a history of engaging and continues to engage in unethical business dealings that implicate Joe Biden directly, but these have been covered up by the mainstream media. And the evidence for this, the evidence all goes back based on Hunter Biden's laptops and associates. Biden is mentally compromised. So Biden is essentially mentally unfit for office and not actually in control of the government. This is really what's important. This is the central aspect. Now, one of the things we do know, if we look back to the Roman Empire when it went through its Pluto return, it went through 3 Pluto returns, by the way. The first Pluto return resulted in the I don't want to say the word election, or they had a sort of nomination election process where the Senate had to approve the emperor. But the emperor that arose, Elagabalus, is considered in Roman history, if you don't believe me, look it up, the worst emperor in the history of Rome, where the denarius, inflation took off. We saw a border crisis break out through the Roman Empire. And it was so bad that the Senate went to the Praetorian Guard, which is essentially the Secret Service, the equivalent of the Secret Service, to the emperor, and said, you got to get rid of this guy. He's, we got to put up somebody else. We got to put another guy in place. That's how bad it was. And so what we see now is an Elagabalus, not so much because of his political views. It's simply because that his administration has been hijacked by a progressive radical left with a fascist plutocratic agenda. And because he's unfit for office and not actually in control of the government, right? We're basically seeing a government, right? Like basically the White House is the front end of the deep state. And there's also leaks coming out, and I keep in touch with people in the Washington Beltway, and, people reach out to me all the time. I have clients and such throughout New York City and the body politic throughout the country. I have people, believe it or not, reach out to me in both parties, and basically their leaks coming out of the DC Beltway is that the Obamas, believe it or not, the Obamas are the primary power brokers that are running things in the White House at this point. So basically they're the arbitrators, decision makers, mediators, whatever you want to call them. They of course, they have a close relationship with Jill Biden and other members within the Biden. And basically they have meetings outside of Biden. And then they just put together a policy and have Joe sign it. Jill sits next to him and says, okay, sign this, right? And basically the policy is promulgated by executive power. So the other thing we see happening is Trump was justified in opposing the Russian investigation because it was an attempt to put Trump in prison for the crime of running against Joe Biden in the 2024 election. Also, what we're seeing with the Pluto return during the fourth turning crisis is the war in Ukraine is disastrous for the West and could precipitate a nuclear conflict between the superpowers. And the media is suppressing dissent on this issue too. And the majority of the Democrats who will vote for Biden, or Kamala in this case, regardless, are also compliant with that dissent. All right. And or supportive of that dissent. American power and influence on the global stage is declining rapidly as institutions and systems established after the World War II crumble. So the global stage, that was, basically the American rules-based order, the international American post-war rules-based order led by the U.S. is breaking apart. U.S. leaders like Biden are no longer competent to govern. So combined with his allegations of a shadow government controlled by Obama, or let's just say, I'm not so much Obama, but Obama is acting as the mediator, the main power broker between the people he serves, right, that get basically that gets translated into actual policy. So basically, with what we're seeing here, like we saw with the Roman Empire with Elagabalus, who was basically incompetent, and he was also compromised in a number of other ways. It implied a power vacuum of instability, which threatened the empire to the point where it nearly began to collapse. They survived it. They came back, but there was it basically triggered the crisis of the 3rd century. And what could soon happen is trigger the crisis of the 21st century. And you have to remember that crisis of the 3rd century didn't just stay in Rome. That was happening. That spread to Germania. It spread to the Middle East. All the instability created all other instability for all other surrounding kingdoms. So, of course, in today's world, if the U.S., right, gets a cold or gets pneumonia or goes into the ER room, the rest of the world is just going to start really unfolding, unraveling, and even Europe and even China and Russia cannot hold it together. They don't have the wherewithal because there's a lack of trust, right? That's one of the issues that goes on. So you have to have trust. There's no consensus on the rules. And so this is what we're seeing. And so now that we set that up and we're saying, okay, there's a power vacuum, there's massive, like basically, what we're seeing here is like many institutions like the media, federal agencies, and public health system are completely corrupted or broken. And this lack of functioning institutions foreshadow massive dysfunction. And there are more indications or indicators coming out about the rise of civil strife and conflict through the persecution of political dissent or dissidents, right? People who are being arrested, people who be unfairly being, prosecuted, etc. So we're basically, like where we're going to see more arrest of opponents, right? And major upheaval and decline is inevitable for America without a massive course correction. There's no doubt about that. I don't care if you vote Democrat and plan to vote Democrat again. You cannot tell me at this point, right, that the leadership in power now is not even operating as the basic principles, values, and beliefs of the Democratic Party as it was established in the 1830s when they changed their name to the Democratic Party. And you could also argue the same for the current crony Republican Party as well, right? But definitely right now, things are just declining. It's a major upheaval, and it's impacting everyone.
To watch the full presentation and more like this on geopolitics, the economy, and world events from an archetypal and mundane astrological perspective, join the Global Transformation Astrology membership. Go to gta.williamstickevers.com. Become a GTA member today.